And here is the Writer's Almanac for Tuesday. It's the 4th of June, 2019. Anniversary of the first awarding of the Pulitzer Prizes in 1917 at Columbia University in New York City. 1919, on this day, Congress approved the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. 1973, on this day, George Wetzel registered a patent for the automated teller machine, the ATM. He was the one who developed the ATM card as we know it today, plastic card, magnetic strip, and embedded PIN code. And it's the anniversary of the June 4th incident, otherwise known as Tiananmen Square in Beijing, 1989. Chinese students and intellectuals had begun calling for economic and political reform at a time of great economic growth in China. The General Secretary of the Communist Party, Hu Yaobang, had been in favor of a more democratic China, but he was forced out of office in 1987, died in April 1989. And on the day of his funeral, 100,000 students gathered in Tiananmen Square to demand reform. Also in other cities across China, by May, about 1 million people were demonstrating. The government warned the crowds to disperse. Martial law declared in mid-May. Crowds of protesters blocked all the avenues to the square. The army was unable to get through. So the government massed tanks and heavily armed troops overnight on June the 3rd. And the next morning, June the 4th, they rolled into Tiananmen Square. Most of the protesters fled. The official death toll was 241, 7,000 wounded. Other estimates place the number much higher. It was on this date in 1896, a young engineer, Henry Ford, completed the building and successfully tested his first experimental automobile, which he called the quadricycle. It was on 4 bicycle tires. He'd been working on it for 2 years out in the shed behind his house on Bagley Avenue in Detroit. It was all ready to test when he discovered it was too wide to go through the door of the workshop, so he had to take an axe to the door frame and the bricks and open up the garage, and soon he was rolling down Grand River Avenue. 2-cycle, 4-horsepower engine. It could go up to 20 miles per hour. It had 2 gears and no brakes, ran on ethanol. It was steered by a tiller. Was not much to look at, but the test drive was a success. It's the birthday of Ruth Westheimer, born in Frankfurt, Germany, 1928, to Orthodox Jewish parents. When the Nazis came to power, the family decided to flee Germany, but the grandmother refused to go, so Ruth was sent to safety in Switzerland, and she never saw her family again. Moved to Palestine, joined the underground movement fighting for a Jewish state, eventually moved to New York, got her degree, and started broadcasting a radio show called Sexually Speaking, which made her famous. Dr. Ruth, the sex expert. Here's a poem for today by John J. Brugaletta, Bondage Love. Houdini's audiences loved him. They were poor people, illiterates, hod carriers, icemen, washerwomen, undernourished kids. They understood what it meant to have your hands manacled, your feet tied, to be put in a straitjacket, then in a box, and sunk. They knew what it was like to have no way out. It was the way the world made love to them. So he showed them, without a word, that one could have no way out, not a single possible way out, and get out. Bondage Love, a poem by John J. Brugaletta from his selected poems, published by Future Cycle Press and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.